Perhaps the most personally upsetting part of the story is the lengths to which the leadership of the department has gone to prevent me from testifying here today. On Friday night, around 9:15, I learned that the Deputy Attorney General's office had directed the Department's Security and Emergency Planning Service to send 2 armed Special Deputy U.S. Marshals to my home to serve me with a letter. The letter was to be served at my home between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock on Friday night. I was in the car with my husband and my parents, who are sitting behind me today, when I got the news that the officers were on their way to my house where my teenage child was home alone. Fortunately, due to the grace of a very decent person who understood how upsetting this would be to my family, I was able to confirm receipt of the letter to an email address, and the deputies were called off. At no point did Mr. Blanche's staff pick up the phone and call me before they sent armed deputies to my home.
For anyone still confused about what fascism looks like, meet former pardon attorney Liz Oyer. She testified in front of congressional Democrats, only because Republicans refused to show up so that they wouldn't upset Trump's Justice Department, as she exposed their intimidation tactics.
The letter was a warning to me about the risks of testifying here today. But I am here because I will not be bullied into concealing the ongoing corruption and abuse of power at the Department of Justice. DOJ is entrusted with keeping us safe, upholding the rule of law, and protecting our civil rights. It is not a personal favor bank for the president. Its career employees are not the president's personal debt collectors. I see only Democratic members here today, but this is not a partisan issue. It should alarm all Americans that the leadership of the Department of Justice appears to value political loyalty above the fair and responsible administration of justice. It should offend all Americans that our leaders are treating public servants with a lack of basic decency and humanity.
Now, I don't know how many Americans realize that Trump's Department of Justice isn't only led by Trump loyalists and recipient of a $25,000 donation from him while she was hearing complaints about his fraudulent Trump University, Pam Bondi, but also chocked full of his personal attorneys, like Todd Blanche, who became a regular scowling statue behind the president every time he left court to complain about breaking the law a million times.
Our country's gone to hell. We don't have the same country anymore. We have a divided mess.
That guy fired Liz Oyer in March over her refusal as a pardon attorney to recommend restoring Mel Gibson's gun rights the way that Trump wanted, after he pleaded no contest to a domestic violence battery charge involving his girlfriend. She was fired for that.
I was asked to write a memo to the Attorney General recommending that these 9 individuals get this relief that she was interested in granting to some deserving Americans. And when the memo came back to me, the comment was, please add Mel Gibson to this recommendation.
Who asked you to add Mel Gibson?
An official in the office of the Deputy Attorney General who is running this project on the day-to-day instructed me that Mel Gibson should be added to the memo. And I responded that I was unable to fulfill the request because I did not have enough information about Mr. Gibson to be able to recommend that, given his history of domestic violence, he should receive his gun rights back. That's something that is a public safety question. It's very dangerous to mix people with history of domestic abuse and firearms. That substantially increases the likelihood of catastrophic outcomes in domestic violence situations, and that was just not a recommendation that I could make lightly.
So Oyer didn't follow orders that clearly show if she did, it vastly increases the chance domestic violence abusers, like Mel Gibson, would easily escalate it to more fatal situations.
More than half of the women killed by gun violence are killed by family members or intimate partners. Delina's death was one of at least 67 gun incidents related to domestic violence that occurred last week.
Not only that, but obvious studies show that more than half of all intimate partner homicides are committed by dating partners. Research shows that when states broaden their firearm prohibition laws beyond federal law to cover abusive dating partners, the states experience a 16% reduction in intimate partner gun homicides. And it goes on to point out that states that require that people subject to domestic violence-related protective orders to provide proof that they actually relinquished their firearms are linked to a 16% reduction in intimate partner gun homicides. So in other words, Liz Oyer's decision to not restore Mel Gibson's guns was made to potentially save someone's life that he could crash out on again. But in Trump's DOJ, if you defy their ignorant orders based on loyalty and friendships, you get fired quickly.
It all unfolded very quickly. I was asked to add him to my recommendation on Thursday evening, and I did not sleep at all Thursday night because I understood that the consequence of not fulfilling this request was likely that I would no longer even be in these conversations. Dissent within the Department of Justice is just being aggressively silenced. People are afraid to speak up. They're afraid to object. I confided in a colleague who expressed the view that yes is really the only acceptable answer to requests that are being made by department leadership. And so I understood that the consequences were potentially serious for my career at the Department of Justice. And when I came into work on Friday morning, I said to a colleague, I really think that Mel Gibson might be my downfall. And within hours of saying that, I was being escorted out of my office.
And you got this letter from Todd, with Todd Blanche's signature on it saying that you were being terminated.
Yeah, I've never met Mr. Blanche, but I received that letter with his signature saying I was being terminated.
So in response to her decision to testify about the administration's treatment of the Justice Department and law firms who act in cases that are disliked by Trump, they sent armed marshals to her house to give her that warning letter. Should you choose to appear before Congress, the department expects that you will abide by your obligations under the law, department policy, and the applicable rules of professional responsibility. Those matters include the deliberative processes that underlie pardons, clemency, the restoration of firearm rights, and related decisions. Her lawyer, Michael Bromwich, in his letter to Blanche, said the claim that Oyer's testimony is barred by executive privilege is baseless and that she's entitled to certain legal protections for whistleblowers. This highly unusual step of directing armed law enforcement officers to the home of a former Department of Justice employee who has engaged in no misconduct, let alone criminal conduct, simply to deliver a letter is both unprecedented and completely inappropriate, is what Bromwich wrote back. In the letter to Oyer, Associate Deputy Attorney General Kendra Wharton said the department has significant confidentiality interests. She said these were particularly strong in Oyer's case because of the role Oyer played in making clemency recommendations for the president, referring to the executive privilege doctrine that shields some presidential communications from disclosure to Congress. They didn't want Liz Oyer to reveal the corrupt and mob-like behavior that has taken over the Department of Justice after only a couple of months under the control of Donald Trump. So they threatened her. One of those revelations that most people may not know about is the harmful results of Trump prioritizing the release of his January 6th foot soldiers, some of which have gone on to continue to break laws and wreak havoc in their local communities.
Happened to the pardon request for January 6 offenders had the normal DOJ pardon process been followed.
Had any of those individuals applied for a pardon, they would have been in due course fully vetted on an individualized basis, and the office would have formed a recommendation about the individual applicants, which would have been provided to the president. The whole role of the office is to ensure that some uniform and consistent standards are provided, and more importantly, the role is to ensure that people who are waiting their turn, who have meritorious cases, that those cases can make their way to the president's desk. Those folks who have access to the White House through the front door, they don't need the help of the Office of the Pardon Attorney to elevate their cause. And there are thousands of ordinary Americans who are seeking the mercy of the president through the clemency process who are not being considered right now because the office is not being consulted. There are individuals who are serving incredibly lengthy sentences under outdated mandatory minimum sentencing laws, and all of those people are on hold because no interaction was happening as of the time of my departure between the Office of the Pardon Attorney and the White House about clemency. The only people being considered for clemency were people who had some sort of inside access, inside track to the White House and could get their cases in front of the president without going through the ordinary process. And that is very concerning, and it causes real reason to lose confidence in the clemency process and real damage to our system of justice.